Hey guys, welcome to the very first episode of Real Talk with E. My name is Ahmad, and today we're just going to be discussing sort of things going around the world right now, especially around Palestine, Israel, and kind of the thoughts and feelings and reflections in what's been going on the last couple of weeks. Good friend of mine, Sam, here with me. How you doing, buddy?
Hi. How you doing?
Good, alhamdulillah, man, alhamdulillah. Thanks for coming on for the first ever episode.
Pleasure. Real Talk with E.
Real Talk with E.
Nice.
Yeah. I've got you here at midnight.
Yep.
Sitting with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got me to. I was hoping to keep this relaxed, but I had to like put on socks and things and like get dressed up for you.
It's your home. You didn't need to do all this stuff. But that's
It's our first podcast. We're trying to keep it professional.
At least we were matching shirts.
We are. You're a black. You love black, anyways.
I like black.
Yeah, and it makes you look slim on camera, so why not?
Does it actually?
Yeah, black is generally a color of like
Nice.
that makes you look more slim. It's like even the stripes. Like if you wear like vertical stripes, slimmer than horizontal, right? Horizontal makes you look wider.
Oh, I didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
Okay, and you probably need to put more thought in my selection of clothing now.
So look, man, I wanted to have this conversation well. A lot of us as friends have been having those in person, offline, on Instagram, etc. And I think I want to reflect on what has been going on in Palestine. You know, as both of us are, Muslims living in the Middle East, so we have our thoughts and perspectives. So I wanted to ask you, where are you, man, mentally right now?
So I say this at the outset, just so that it's clear for everyone. I'm very, very pro-Palestinian in my stance, and I've grown up with a lot of Palestinians as best friends. So even the time I spent in university in Canada, I would be wearing a "I Love Palestine" scarf around campus. So I'm very, very pro-Palestine from that perspective. But I'm also pro-life. At the end of the day, I think any civilian life, whether that's Palestinian or Israeli, I think causes a bit of discomfort when you kind of see the images that were coming out on October 7th, on the day of the attack. And of course, the stuff that you see now is very, very disconcerting. So it's a tough position. It's a feeling of helplessness.
Yeah.
Right. Because you see these images that on Instagram. Every time you open your Instagram, you see these images, and outside of duas and outside of donating anything to charity, like you feel helpless. You feel like you can't actually do anything to help. And it kind of comes down to. So I've always had this hadith in mind from the Prophet, who said that if you see something wrong happening, stop it with your hands, with action. If you can't do that, then say out loud that there's something wrong. And if you can't do that, then at least in your heart say that this is wrong. I'm obviously paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But like, obviously, as us living here, the first instinct is to say, what can we do? What can we do to help? And then once you realize, well, outside of keeping the discourse alive on social media, there's not much you can do. Right? So I think and that's the general feeling of helplessness across the board.
Yeah.
I think that's how people are feeling. But what about you?
Yeah, a lot of the sentiment I think that you said. I think helplessness. You go through so many different emotions, right? You feel angry, you feel helpless, you feel broken. Yeah, especially being a parent of kids, right? Like Ibrahim, Liana, 9 and 5. All the images that come out right now, and you see the kids. It's those are tough. I think as a parent, it's hard because you feel guilt, and this I've spoken. A lot of people have said this to me. Basically, everything you're doing that is positive in your own life triggers you. You know what I mean? Like if I'm sitting in the living room and I'm playing with the kids, like any game, your mind immediately goes to like the pictures on Instagram with some parent holding their child and burying them and putting them in an ice cream truck, right? Or the like an orphan child looking for their mom and the whole family's gone. That's it, right? Wiped out. So I think as a parent, like there's no moment that's not any good moment with the kids automatically triggers you. So it's something that I feel like I don't want you to feel this pain, obviously, but when you get married and have children, I think it's been a deeper hurt that you feel.
Do you find the kids asking you questions about what's happening in Palestine, and how do you answer that?
And then obviously Ibrahim, my eldest is 9, so he's old enough, I think. So I definitely sit down and have a conversation with him. The thing is, the whole mood, man, the whole mood in the house, to be honest, the last couple of weeks is very, very low, man. The vibe, the thing, everything feels. The kids see it, right? Like we can be you scroll through like Instagram suddenly, and you have to hide the phone from the kids, right? So me and everybody, I think this is not just about us. Everyone's feeling that. So they definitely feel it. Obviously, my youngest one was 4, too small. So all we make her do is she drew Palestinian flags and try to give examples of. I tell Ibrahim to make dua at night for Palestinians when he goes to bed. But I talk to him, and I do. And the truth is, there are times that he's got scared. I won't lie. Like he's asked me that. Why do all countries? Why does everyone hurt Muslims? He's asked me that. He's also asked me, then are they going to come to this land? Like we live in Dubai, so they ask me, are they going to come take over here? So, I believe in letting them know what's going on in obviously a way like you don't want to show pictures and stuff, obviously, man. But without the prejudice of like, I'm a firm believer of this, and I'm not just saying this because we're on camera and stuff, but like, this is a problem with the Israeli government, Israeli military, or that mindset. This is not something that we feel against Jews, right? And so I'm very clear with that with Ibrahim or with any faith, because as Muslims post 9/11, you saw how we were brushed all as all Muslims aren't. What would they say? Like all Muslims aren't terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslims, right? Yep. That's what they would say. So I'm the first person to say that no, there would be a sect of people or certain kind of people who can have extreme ideologies, but you can't paint the whole faith with that. And you've seen like, is it Jewish Voice of, what is that? JVP? Is it in US in North America? So there's enough Jewish voices.
A few.
There's a lot of Jewish voices, right?
There's a few. There's a sect of rabbis that are against Zionism. Right. You'll see them at every kind of pro-Palestine protest.
Right.
And their belief is that they're establishing a state of Israel for the Jews is actually against their Talmudic law.
Yeah.
Right. And so you actually have quite a few voices on the left not just around the world in Jews, but even in Israel.
Yeah.
For example, who are speaking out against this, who are protesting against that. So do you ever go into kind of questions about what Zionism is versus Judaism? You mentioned with
I think the basic definition. I think I know the basic definition, but I know what's interesting about you is that you actually, because we were talking about where we get the news from, right? You actually go into like and read like Israeli news as well.
I do. It's and I think it's very important to understand both sides, and you can condemn one side as right or wrong, and that's fine. But in order to ever think about what a solution to problems or what the other side's thinking, you need to hear what they're reporting in the news, right? So I'll read the live news in Times of Israel. I'll read the news on the Haaretz as well. Obviously, on the Palestinian side, I follow Al Jazeera, and I follow that. And it's very interesting to see the rhetoric that's coming from the Israeli side, obviously, right? And it's kind of continuing the line of what the government is saying.
So both these papers you're talking about are both very right-wing?
Times of Israel, I wouldn't say they're right-wing necessarily, and this is for Times of Israel more, but they're very much continuing the rhetoric that the government's spewing out at the moment, right? Which is, and in all fairness, they have also covered civilian deaths. It's not that they're completely turning a blind eye to that, but there's significantly more coverage, and it makes sense. As a society, they're in wartime. Right. So when you're in war as a society, as a nation against any organization or a country, you're going to create an us versus them situation. So there's not going to be a lot of room for discourse.
Not right now. Not at this point.
Not right now. But even with the way the government's framed it, with Netanyahu's government framing it, I think they've very much created if you remember post 9/11, there was very much a us versus them. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. Kind of the Israeli government's peddling the same mindset at the moment. And but it is interesting though still to read that rhetoric coming out from Israel and seeing what their newspapers are reporting. And I think, and I was actually reading an article on this the other day where even the moderate voices in Israel that are trying to speak up to say, look, you guys are going too far, they're being shut down. I think there was an example of a journalist who simply, I think, put out a tweet that said, we should all say a prayer for all the civilians that are dying in Gaza. And I think this was in Tel Aviv or Haifa, I can't remember where. And he had a mob show up at his house. And the mob was firing firecrackers and fireworks at his windows and trying to break in. And he's Israeli. He's Jewish. But all he said was, let's say a prayer for the civilians and the kids that are dying in Gaza. So it's the mentality at this time, obviously, reading what's coming out of there, and it's very clear when you read all the other mainstream Western media news as well, is it's very much, it's us against them. We're at wartime. We have to go and we have to annihilate them, whatever the cost.
Yeah. And while like you feel like, obviously we completely disagree with that, but like if you try to understand from the other side, this is always what happens post something like this. Like you mentioned 9/11, you can talk about even any attack in any other place. You talk about something happened in India after 26/11 or whatever. Like the initial reaction is go get him, right? And there's very little room for like nuance, and those voices get kind of squashed. I was watching the Bassam interview with Chris Morgan, the long one.
Yeah.
Right?
The second one.
The second one, right?
Yeah.
He mentioned how, I believe he mentioned that Obama was saying the big challenge with Israel and Palestine is the disparity in power between the two. And when it's such a disparity, the bully can just keep bullying, because why not? Like, no one can stop me. No one can stop them now. Why would they change their way? And the other one we've seen tried the peaceful way, doesn't work. Tried resistance, doesn't work. Tried democratic electing somebody, doesn't work. And there's no way that seems to work, right? But that's why, like, if you recall, like Oppenheimer, right? And what they eventually accused him of, that once he made the atomic bomb for the West, he apparently gave that to the Russians as well. Because as soon as both parties have it, now you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Now you're equals in a sense.
It's a balance of power.
It's a balance of power, right? And that's what doesn't exist. And if it did exist, perhaps maybe these two countries, if they were completely on their own, would still have friction because of the historically, but balance of power holds things back. And the biggest example, I think, is India, Pakistan. Two power countries at the border. There's people who love each other in there, there are people who hate each other, right? But because they both have nukes, there is a balance of power at some level, right? And because Palestine doesn't have that, I feel like, why would the status quo change?
So it's that, again, it's that feeling of helplessness that you just mentioned, right? They've tried everything. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has tried to take the moral high ground. And you've seen the increased amount of settlements on the West Bank without any kind of recourse. So it's almost as if you've pushed someone in the corner and they have no other option but to do this. Not to say whether that's right or wrong without condemning or condoning, but it very much seems like you've left a certain people with absolutely no choice on what else to do. And they don't have any bargaining powers like you've mentioned, right? What do they bargain with? Israel's already the occupier. They're already building settlements in contravention to international law. No one's lifting a finger. No one's saying a word. They won't let the ICJ prosecute. They won't let any cases come up over there. The US vetoes any Security Council resolutions. What do they do? What else can they possibly do, right? And I've seen, when this is, I think, part of what the uproar is. If you listen to even CNN or Fox News is Fox News, but if you listen to the thing there, a lot of journalists will question, well, the Palestinians should get up in arms against Hamas, they should topple their government, and they should do, and it's such a sign of an uneducated person in this particular conflict, right? For them to be able to say that, and I think that is broadly reflective of not just Western media bias, but Western media not understanding the situation, either from an unwillingness perspective or from a perspective of they just haven't educated themselves about it. Like for actual respected journalists on Western media channels to actually say that, like it was mind-boggling for me to listen to.
And on this angle, the thing that disappointed me, I mean, the funny thing is, over the last couple of weeks, like the amount of people we've unfollowed who we used to follow, celebrities or artists or sportsmen, because of their bias or opinions just one way. Like one of them was Jordan Peterson, man.
Yeah,
I was a fan. I was a fan, and a lot of times Muslims or conservative Muslims, these guys are more on the right, and we do align with a lot of their views. But just what he said, and then he came out recently again, Piers Morgan, and spoke. And while he tried to speak in a better way, exactly what you just said, he literally said, the people of Gaza are responsible for their leadership, And it's kind of like the children and the grandkids pay the sins of their forefathers, and it's very easy to say that.
And in no other part of the world would you ever hear that kind of rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
Going on. Like you look at the Ukrainian and Russian conflict, look at any other conflict in the world, you would never see anyone else saying that. But and I think that's why the world is up in arms. Most of the world is, right? Where it's at some point it just becomes very clear what right and wrong is. You can move beyond the nuanced conversation to say, okay, this is very clearly black and white, right? And I think that's what's bothering most people is there's so few world leaders coming out and saying that this is just plainly wrong.
This happens, sadly, like every year or so, like something major happens, right? Between the two. I mean, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago when they attacked the Masjid al-Aqsa in Ramadan, right?
Yep.
And then again, stuff started happening. I believe it was last year.
It was last year.
Right. So there's always, and then, we're all of a sudden pain in Ramadan, we're feeling it. But this is different, right? Because the feeling in general with all of us,
it's the scale.
Yeah.
And again, it's a very good point that you've mentioned, right? It's the only reason Western media has covered this as much because Israel was attacked first.
Yeah,
think about all the conflicts.
Nailed it, right? Yeah.
Think about all the conflicts that have happened, and this is part of the reason why every single person that goes on Western media is pro-Palestinian. Every time they're asked this question, "Do you condemn Hamas?" They're like, "Well, why wouldn't you bring us on? At this conflict, or when these many people are killed, or that's happening, or this is happening, or that's happening."
Yeah.
Or every time Israel announces a new settlement that's in contravention to international law, why wouldn't you call us then and ask us to condemn that?
Yeah, and the fact that West Bank has absolutely nothing to do with this, right? The settlements are mainly in West Bank, so
correct.
Yeah.
So Israel's gone on the offensive multiple times, right? Over the course of the last 2-3 decades, even going further. But again, this is the first time Israel's been attacked. And I guarantee you, irrespective of the scale of the Israeli attack, I think the conflict would have gained as much coverage because Israel had been attacked.
That's sad, eh?
And it is sad. And I think that's what infuriates so many people is that there's such a blatant and brazen double standard when it comes to Israel and Palestine.
Yeah.
That it's just infuriating for people.
Yeah.
And that's why you're seeing the kind of protests you are seeing all across the world to say, treat them fairly.
And the double standard thing, man, I think what boils your blood is when Biden would come out and talk about, I don't really trust the numbers coming out of Gaza, right? But that same question isn't said at October 7th, right?
Well,
whether that happened exactly how it was reported or not, it could have been that this is very tragic, but let's hold on a second. But that it's not given, that benefit that's not given.
Well, anytime anyone's ever questioned any of the numbers coming out of October 7th, like the most famous one is the 40 beheaded babies, right? And I don't know, from whatever I've seen, like I can't make a distinction either way, but there does seem to be at least some level of disparity in terms of what's being reported versus what happened with that. And anyone who's raised a question about that is shunned, right? And again, double standards, right? You can question the casualties coming out of Palestine, but if someone even questions a report that's dubious, even by Israeli media standards, right? It's you're shunned for it. So it's back to that double standard, which is why the world is up in arms about this.
The thing is, you can't even, like, we're seeing the visuals, right? And we see the visuals come out so quickly. They're like, Instagram is breaking news or Twitter, whatever, right? You can't lie about this, right? You can't make it up. What you're seeing, man.
Casualties in Gaza are approaching 10,000, right? Half that. And I'm not going to make any disrespect, but half that, let's say just for argument's sake, half of those deaths were, that's still 5,000 people dead, half of them children, right? So you don't believe the numbers if you don't want to, as President Biden, right? Say they're 50% off mark, right? That's a fair number that you can say yourself. That's still 5,000 people dead, half of them children, right? So it is bloodlust at this stage. It is purely about revenge at this stage. And I mean, I was reading an interesting article written by, I think, a senior correspondent in Al Jazeera who was giving his opinion piece. And he was saying, how many Hamas fighters are they claiming they've killed? Oh, 10, 13, right? Barely, if they have. You're telling me 13 Hamas fighters used 10,000 Gaza civilians as human shields?
Thing is, when this argument that they use is just, when you don't have to prove it, they don't have to prove any evidence, right? So they can just say this refugee camp had these people underneath.
But it's illogical in any war, in any conflict, in any battle. Even if there's a thief or a murderer, if he's not going to go hide in an abandoned hut in the middle of nowhere and tempt the police to come and catch him there, right? Like the Gaza Strip is a besieged strip. You can't go anywhere else, right? How else are... I don't understand this. It's a very illogical argument to start with. Of course, Hamas fighters are going to be within the Gaza Strip, right? That's the only place they have. It's not like they're going to go in the middle of the desert and tell Israel, hey, guys, we're here. We're in the middle of the desert. Come attack us here.
Yeah.
Like, again, I don't understand. There's a fallacy with that whole argument to start with.
My other point, actually, is to something you just raised, is that I don't want to call it it's not a war, though, right? A war is very two equal parties going at each other. This isn't. But I think when they say war, then it justifies the means to an end, right? And I think that's the problem, because war means, yeah, of course people are going to die. Because when they keep referring to World War I and World War II. World War II every time. It was war and it happened, right? The Germans, to kill the Germans, how many people died?
Yeah.
They had to kill it. Look at how many people they killed in Japan. So that is problematic, I think, because it's not a war. And the other thing is just the fact that October 7th, horrible, whatever the case may be, one is an occupier, one is occupied, right?
Yeah.
It cannot be, right? No matter how horribly the one who's occupied resists, and maybe it's a horrible move politically to do, it's a horrible move logically, for all reasons, what they did doesn't make any sense, or maybe it was a really idiotic thing to do, but they're still the ones who are occupied. So it's not a balance, man. What has been are you on Instagram a lot or no?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah. More these days than
more these days, and I consider myself a very kind of a strong person when it comes to graphic images. But the images that I've seen, and I'm following, I think, the same people: Khalid Baidoun, Motaz Aziza. It's harrowing. It shakes you to your core. You don't really know how to react. You feel like crying. You feel like dropping on your knees and praying to God. Like it's that confusion. It's that mix. You don't understand how to react to something like this. And again, I was thinking to myself the other day, and I was thinking, if these people in Gaza weren't Muslim, would I be reacting the same way? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a true servant of God, and if you follow Islam, then you're supposed to value human life, of course, whether that's Muslim or not. So, which is why I think, even in October 7th, I think, irrespective of the evidence, I think the fact is that civilians were killed, innocents were killed. So even when those images came out, before this whole conflict started, either way, you see those images and you go, that's sad. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Right? Without condemning or condoning Israel as a government or as a state in any way. It's just, those are innocent people as well.
Yeah, this thing is so, polarizing and divisive that, I don't know if people are able to see each other's pain anymore. You know what I mean? Like, there's obviously the military and the government, and you can dislike each other in that form. But like you said, obviously, if a mother losing her child, or grandparents, Israeli versus Palestinian versus any nationality, any religion, it's all painful, man. Right?
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
Right? If it's wrong on both sides, it's wrong on both sides, right? And it's and again, I think one thing that's happened in media recently is people, obviously, when they don't answer that first question they're asked, do you condemn Hamas? The presenter almost tacitly assumes that they are supporting Hamas, that they support the death of those civilians. And I don't think that's almost ever the case.
Yeah.
In there. But I think that always gets lost in that conversation about this didn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's an interesting point that you've made, is that we're still disconnected, right? how many Palestinian people around the world have relatives who have died in Gaza, or who have a relative's relative who have died, right? At this point. You ask them this question, maybe they'll have a very, very different answer.
So literally today at dinner, one of the guys that I play basketball with, he messaged me, just telling us that his wife's second cousin's family just died in Gaza, like 4 of them. So yeah, what do you tell somebody like that, right? How do you reason with that? And you know what's crazy is, man, that the ones obviously who are dying is horrible, but the ones who are living through it, like,
they're the ones left behind, right?
Yeah, man. Like how do you expect like a child who lost everything to grow up and want to have a reasonable and rational conversation with the other side? It'll never happen, man.
It was
very difficult.
It was interesting. Al Jazeera posted, and this was I think a couple of years ago, they posted an interview from the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank of some of the resistance fighters there.
Yeah.
And in one of the interviews, one of the masked fighters was making a point to say, you know, this wasn't the life we would have wanted, right? We would have wanted a good life as well, but we see no choice. Either we do this or we're going to be killed one day, right? And that's the sad thing, is that it's almost such a simple root cause that so many people in the world know today, but nothing is going to be done even after this to address it, right? It's not in the Israeli government's interest to cede land that they're currently occupying.
Yeah.
They've built so many settlements in the West Bank. And again, the sad truth of it is there's just no willingness to address the root cause. Even though I think at this point, it's pretty clear for everyone what that root cause is, right?
Yeah. Well, because of what they've done, you can never go back to 1967. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
because they kept carving away at this. Yeah, but
that's
like
the hope that you do go back to.
Yeah, but that means giving back, letting those refugees come back to the land that they've taken. They're not going to do that.
So, well, there's the right of return of refugees, but then there's also the settlements that are built on the West Bank.
Are they going to dismantle the settlements? Like,
and yeah, I mean, they did in Gaza when they pulled out in 2005. But that was far less than obviously what's in the West Bank. And I think that's part of the criticism that's being levied on the Israeli government today, is that you were so focused on the West Bank and depowering them and, you know, building settlements there and carving that land up, that you completely ignored the people in Gaza, right? And I think it goes to show, people have been saying for years, you can't just lock a door, lock 2 million people inside a house and throw away the key and expect that to just be the status quo. So that's a lot of the criticism that's being levied from inside Israel as well.
Man, if we try to be positive in some sense. Definitely, I feel like through social media, like people are opening up to what the truth is and are calling out what it is and seeing it for themselves beyond, because it just doesn't work if like Arabs or Muslims or this part of the world sees it, right? That's not it needs to be the world as together, the West, white folks, different faiths and stuff, they need to see it, understand it, acknowledge it for it to make a change, right?
I've seen a lot more, and again, maybe it's just the feeds that I have, but I've seen a lot of Jewish people, whether secular or religious, protesting in favor of Palestine this time around as well. Yeah. Which there have been small numbers previously. So that's hopeful, right? And at the end of the day, Israel pegs itself as a Jewish state. If you know, the majority of the Jews in the world themselves come up and say, not in our name, then that's positive, right? That there's positive that, you know, at some point this stops and future generations can live their lives in peace and have a future. But you're right. I think it is, the positive is that the voices that have propped up this time all across the world is the most I've ever seen. Maybe it's the scale of the deaths that are being reported, but it's the most that I've ever seen, which means more and more people are raising their voices.
Yeah. Like, it's so graphic, things that come out, right? And like, one angle of you sometimes feels like, don't share it, man. Like, it's kind of disrespectful to the people who are lost, but also if you don't share it, then people won't know, man. And they need to see how horrible this is, right? To feel the pain of what.
I think it needs to be shared.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think your first thought as a human being is when you see those images to say, you just don't know how to think.
Yeah.
But then you realize that those images need to come out for people, and especially for people who are not already pro-Palestine, right? For people who either don't care or are on the pro-Israel side, they need to see what's happening. Because the one thing I can guarantee you is, and from someone who reads the Israeli side, none of these images are being shared. None of those videos are being shared. Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And I think the very kind of mention that these are the deaths in Palestine and these are the number of children that are dying is not acceptable at this moment in Israeli society. I think, and you see that with interviews of people like Naftali Bennett and some of the people from the Israeli government, where every time they're questioned about Palestinian deaths, the reply back from them is, "How dare you?" Right? How dare you? As if, for example, 1,400 of their civilians dying means that they get a free pass to kill as many Palestinians as they want. And if you see one of his interviews, I think it was with Sky News, where he was literally asking the president, "How dare you ask me about Palestinian civilians when we lost 1,400 of ours?" So there's a certain arrogance in there too, right? Where there's
a lot of hatred, man.
And hatred is one thing, Imad, but there's arrogance. There's arrogance where it's, you killed 1,400 of ours, we will kill 100 times more of yours. How dare you kill even one single civilian of ours? Right? There is a certain arrogance within, I guess, the Israeli government and the elite political class that Israeli lives are more important than Palestinians.
I was telling you, like, before you were coming, I was like, I wanted to get you water, and I had like the carbonated Perrier, and I was like, I don't know if I can put this on here because, like, of all the boycott and everything going on, right, with the brands.
Are they part of the BDS?
They're part of it because I think they come under Pepsi, right? Yeah. So that's what brought in like local water for us to drink. What are your thoughts on all that stuff going on?
On the BDS side? Look, any kind of activity that shows that you are against the policies that the Israeli government's making, I think is positive, right? If nothing else, if it doesn't have a tangible effect on any company or the economy as a whole, at the bare minimum, it signifies defiance. Right? Not to buy the kind of the things that the Israeli government's peddling right now. So I think any initiative that shows a defiance towards the Israeli government's policies, and whether symbolic or not, I think is good. Whether that has any tangible effect, I don't know. I don't know, to be honest.
But like you said, like there's only so much normal civilians and people that can do. So we can do something great. I look at it as to sort of each their own, right? Whoever wants to do it, do it. I'm not telling people what to do or not to do, because there are a lot of brands, man. You have to really kind of revisit your entire like kitchen, your closet, and everything, right, to see what to buy and what not to buy. But anything, I think, because like we need to be willing to make sacrifices, right? Otherwise, it's very easy to like sit here and make a video or put a post on Instagram, but like if we're not willing to make any changes in our lives ourselves, right? What is your from Islamic perspective, right? Like how are you dealing with things from that perspective?
It's tough, right? So, and again, it's like you said, we're still blessed to only be seeing these images and seeing these news and reading these news articles coming out. We're blessed in the sense that we haven't had an extended family member, or we haven't had like a cousin or a family that's wiped out in Gaza that we've been related to, right? So grief can overtake a person, and when there are things like 10 members of your family have just been killed, where do you start to grieve, right? And where do you start, right? You have a mother that passes away, and you start to grieve for that mother. And then you've learned that 9 other members of your family, including cousins, brothers, sisters, wives, sons, daughters, have passed away. Where do you start to grieve as a person? How do you not go mad with grief at that point? You try to put yourself in that position, and I'll come back to your question, but you put yourself in that position. If one member of your family passes away, you can imagine you can imagine yourself to be overtaken by grief, right? Where do you even start grieving? And Islamically, what I'm just in awe of is their sabr and their faith and their iman.
Yeah, that's
It's
crazy.
and I say this, I'm in awe.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have imagined that human beings would have been capable of experiencing that much grief and that much loss and not losing their faith and not losing their iman.
Mm.
And I put myself in that position, and I don't think I would be that strong. And so what that does Islamically is it makes you reevaluate what your iman is and what you know, we think of sabr in terms of, oh, we've had a pitfall in life, or we've had a stumbling block in life, or we need to have sabr, we need to have patience. Not to trivialize anyone else's battles, right? Everyone's going through their own battles. But it makes you think that there's a whole nother level to this, to the sabr, to the patience, to the iman that is just it's unfathomable is the word I would use.
Yeah.
So, and what about you?
Yeah, man, I think like the things that you see, it's just, for me, really, man, like it's, like the Quran is something that we've always like over the years, some people read it more, some people less, but like there's stories in it you can relate to, and a lot that maybe you can't, and you try to mature and go into it and stuff, but like it's never felt more relevant than now. I swear to God, man, you open it now and read, and it is talking about exactly what's happening now, and it's telling you as Muslims how to deal with it. It's telling you as people in Palestine how to deal with it, and how to be able to make sense of all this from different aspects of why is this happening? How does God allow this to happen? How to be patient? What is the reward for that? And calling out like the hypocrisy of the world. So like, I feel like, wow, the relevance of the text right now is amazing, and we need that, because without that we're broken, man. It's not normal to sit and watch kids die, man. Like every day you're waking up and someone has have a head, a limb, faces burned, kids blind, crying. This is not we watch it and it's one of those things, right? You don't want to watch it, but you're just looking at it. It's one of those weird things about human beings, but like, because you wake up in the morning with this, right? You go to bed with this, right? And then I don't know about you, but like haven't been sleeping well for like weeks. I mean, there's no excuse, and who cares about what people like us feel, right? With what's going on with them. But so I think have to lean on Islam, man. Have to lean on that, because without that, like, there's nothing, man.
I've got to imagine though that again, thinking of it objectively for a moment, that at some point, and I'm not even talking about the people in Gaza, but talking about even people looking at us, Muslims looking at us from an outside perspective, how do you reconcile that thought of so much evil happening in the world, of so much death and destruction of innocence in the world, with God's promise, right? I could imagine that this could just as easily lead to a crisis of faith for a lot of other people as well. Just like there are people who, for example, like you, who would turn more to the Quran and who would read that more and who would find relevance in there for what's going on and applying it to the world. I can imagine there are a lot of other people out there that are having crisis of faith at this stage, right?
I guess. I mean, obviously people closest to me are maybe are similar to us, and they think like we do. Man, but if you, obviously I can't speak on that. If somebody is feeling that way and they feel
it's a difficult feeling to reconcile, right? Where you're told to believe in God's plan and you're told to have faith, and just because we look to the Quran for further guidance probably doesn't mean everyone else does.
Yeah.
Right.
But to that point though, is exactly what you're saying, that's when, so let's just say we're weak and we're broken and we've lost faith in things. But that's when you see that child who like is buried and then they're telling her to say the shahada and the fingers up. If they can do it, if those guys, like, if let's just say there was no faith coming out from death, then we could be like, they hate life and they hate God and everything that they're going through, and we feel the same way. But it's almost like, instead of us giving them strength, right, it's the Palestinians, the people in Gaza, who give us strength.
Very true.
Which is doesn't even make sense.
I agree.
But we're watching their pain, and their reaction makes us believe more and have more faith.
There are lessons, and as bad and as negative as this may sound, there are lessons for all the Muslims in the world from what the Gazans are going through right now, from what the Palestinians are going through right now, right? Is you always look at someone else and say, they're suffering. If they can keep patience and faith through all of this, then like you can through your life as well.
Yeah. But what do you as an individual trying to do from your side that you'd be willing to be open to share whatever in your capacity? Like,
I think it depends on everyone else. For example, I don't have a platform with many followers. I in my capacity, I can only reshare, for example, things that other people are sharing to the few followers that I have. But more than that, whatever the capacity God's given me to donate to official agencies, obviously I do that. There's any volunteer opportunities to do that, and just it comes full circle back to what I said at the very beginning, right? The Prophet said, if you can stop it with your hand, stop it. If you can speak out against it, if you can't stop it, and if you speak out against it, and if you can't speak out against it, the bare minimum, say in your heart that what's happening is wrong.
Yeah, otherwise the message from the Quran is very clear. Is to be, prayer and patience, right? That's the way to do it. So from a religious point of view, from a personal point of view, if we need to, or I believe, at least for myself and my family, that it's easy for me to preach and say these things, but if I'm not coming closer to God and returning back to the faith in a stronger way, then it's not. I'm not going in the right direction. I'm not saying me being a good Muslim helps the whole world, right? That's not. It's being very self-centered, but it is part of that. Like, be better yourself too, right? Like, so for example, if we're sitting on podcasting all night, but and we we're talking about something that we believe is an important thing to talk about, but then you and I are not getting the Fajr, that repeats the whole purpose, I feel, in my point, right? So we focus on the fundamentals of our deen, we cling on to that, because that's what gets us through, and we pray for them, and then we do whatever we can, but with wisdom, right? Because there's obviously, actually, my mom would tell me this, right? When I was younger, and I would be you're a young kid, you're in high school, and you see what's happening in Afghanistan, Iraq, and you feel angry, right? So my mom would always tell me that, how can you serve better, Ahmad? Like, if you're educated and you're successful in life, let's just say financially, whatever, maybe that's the way you can serve your community and those people, more than being some angry person who's not focused. And I mean, finances is a big deal, man. Muslims being and Arabs or whatever the world, people on the right side being influential and strong makes a difference, right? So I look at I say that to the youth, I say that to myself, to everybody, that act in wisdom. Like, all of us work in multinational organizations, they have their own policies, rules. So to be smart with that, and then obviously the country, and there's a law of the land, so to work within that framework. Otherwise, you're unnecessarily going to get yourself in a situation where, if you can't help yourself, how you can help somebody else?
True. True. I agree. You make yourself strong enough that you can give yourself a platform to say things.
Yeah.
And maybe one day, hopefully, affect change.
Inshallah. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for whoever was listening to this. This is episode 1 of Real Talk with E. And if you enjoyed it, just comment, like, and try to subscribe. And hopefully we'll bring you some more interesting conversations in the future. Peace.
Take care.